Welcome back to Meet the Makers. Another 3D printer here that we have with us today, Blake from Armour3dprints. And Blake, thank you so much for coming out here today and talking to us about what you make.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys inviting me.
Of course. So I will kick you off with the same question that we always start with, which is just talk us through how you got into 3D printing and just making things in general.
Yeah, I went to college back in 2010 and I was in engineering school. So that was when 3D printers were first becoming a thing. And
Yeah.
I built my first one in 2010 with my professor and then didn't touch 3D printing until 2017. I was in the military and I just bought an Ender 3 and started printing from there and really didn't get big until 2020. I had my first viral video on TikTok and it exploded into what it is now.
I feel like a lot of military guys, they get that first check and they go out and either buy a car or something. So I guess the 3D printer isn't that crazy. It isn't that terrible of a way to spend your money, especially for it's blossomed into something that you've done for all these years. But no, it's cool hearing that. And it's funny that, like you were saying, back in 2010, when they were first 3D printers coming onto the scene, at the time I had still been in high school. And I remember they had 3D printers and I was like, man, that's such a dumb class. So I would never take a class about that. And now here both are as 3D printers. So it's always funny to me, like the way that something earlier on in your life can transform into something that becomes much larger.
Yeah, I think the first one was like rep rap. And the professor was like, what do you guys think this machine does? And I was like, it makes itself. And then he was like, actually, yes. He said it prints its own parts so you can make more printers. And I was like, okay, that's actually really cool. And I loved building stuff. So it was just learning that stuff. I never got deep into the whole G code thing. I was more into the hardware of it.
For you, we started off with building that machine, but what printers do you have that you run nowadays in your setup?
So now I have 3 Bamboo Lab X1 carbons over on my wall. That's my main 3 babies that I run. But behind me, I've got I think it's a CR60. It's the treadmill one.
Yeah.
I actually haven't run it yet. I just haven't had time. I got that while I was deployed, and it just has been sitting here. But other than that, actually, you can't. Oh, it's just off screen. I also run a Haygears Reflex Ultracraft. That's what Ultracraft Reflex, and that's my that's my nice resin printer. So
that's something I'm always curious about. I don't have the opportunity to talk to as many people who do resin printing, and for people who listen who like are on different sides of it, I guess I'll start. Can you real quick just like talk us through like the general difference between resin and FDM for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so FDM, it's like fused plastic, does layers. It's pretty basic. Plastic goes through, comes out the hot end, melts it down, and then spits it out line by line. Resin printing is different in that you're using almost like the same kind of resin that they use for nails and stuff. And it uses a blacklight, or usually it's a blacklight, that then shoots an image of each sliced layer at a time. So it builds it upside down. So with a regular like bed slinger, it's slowly building and the bed moves down. With a resin printer, it dips into a vat of resin, lifts up, and then dips back down, cures, lifts up. So yeah, it's faster usually than an FDM printer. But it also depends on like your orientation.
Right,
so if it's like straight up and down, obviously it's going to be more layers.
I'm so unfamiliar with even what exists out there in the world of resin. I know you said that's like your big boy machine that you have over there. Is that maybe something that people would consider comparable to the X1 carbon of the resin side?
I would definitely say so. It's the Bamboo Labs, the X1 carbon equivalent. It's actually about the same price. They're about $1,200. It's super user friendly. That's why I like it. I'm not sponsored by Haygears or anything. They talked to me at one point because they had some questions. But really, I have a bunch of starter ones too. They're actually right there on my floor. I've got some Anycubic photons, and that's the one I always, whenever anybody is like in my Discord asking me about what printers should I get, especially in resin, I always say just get yourself an Anycubic. Normally people are trying to print like D&D figures.
Right.
It's the right build size, and they're usually real cheap, so you can get them for a couple $100.
I always say, because I think there's still a huge population of people out there who they think of 3D printing, and a lot of us on TikTok or on social media, I feel like we're talking about Bamboo Lab printers or other printers that can be like a little bit pricier, but no, there's still a lot of great machines out there that definitely are really solid. And like again, like I'm so unfamiliar with the resin side, but like for those more entry-level machines, do you find that it's more maintenance and more upkeep, or is it just lower resolution? What does that look like for resin?
Yeah. So typically when you're paying a lot for a resin printer, you're usually actually just buying build volume. So your cheaper machines are going to be smaller. I know a lot of people because they actually use resin printing when making jewelry. So I have a friend who made earrings, and so she would resin print out a little earring, and she only needed a tiny little build plates. But really, when you pay more, you're going to start getting a little bit better quality as well. And it's not so much like It is resolution because, right, the screen that's shining the photons up can be higher quality. It can be a 4K screen or like an 8K screen, like your television.
Right.
So, yeah, obviously, the higher the resolution of that screen, then the better detail you're going to get in your little resin print. But yeah, really, the best I've seen is like the 4K stuff. After that, you're starting to pay for, I think this one, it like heats the resin and it has like a pulsing thing that helps it release from the FEP film. It's
Yeah.
significantly more intense. And if you get up into the $3,000 printers, those ones will straight up clean themselves.
Oh,
And yeah. So that's real nice. I don't pay for that. They do like dentistry with it.
I feel like on the resin side, you get into a lot more of those specialty applications, like you said, like jewelry making and dentistry, which I now every time that I go to a dentist or anywhere that I suspect they might have a 3D printer, I'm always peeking around the corner. Oh,
Yeah,
what are
yeah. My
they working
dentist
with back there?
contracts out for 3D printing. Like I
Oh,
don't necessarily think it's dentures. I'm pretty sure it's just molds so that they can make dentures. But I've
yeah.
been considering you just have to have a very special resin for that my printer cannot do. You have to get the Form Labs and stuff to get those. But yeah, that's I mean, if anyone wants to make a business, that's pretty huge doing contracting work.
That's the other thing I always imagine. You think of this dentist who have a very specialized career, and then I just think of all the goofy makers out there, like 3D printers on the internet, and the same person just like tinkering away in between making dragons and other things, like casting up medical applications
Yeah,
with
you're
the 3D
making like the
printer
little
stuff.
squiggly serpents and stuff, but you're also
Yeah.
making very detailed teeth. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fun back and forth there. Now, for you, like the thing that I am, whenever I see your content, always comes to mind for me are all the devil fruit that you make. And a recurring
Yes.
trend for me is that I historically am like so out of touch with pop culture. I don't watch a ton of TV. I don't watch a ton of movies. So I'm actually not familiar with where these like devil fruit originate from, but I'm always so invested in the different ones that you have. And maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about like, the origins of how you got started in making so many of these.
Yeah. I'm a huge nerd. My sleeves are all video games and comic books and stuff. One of my favorite, actually, I think it was the first anime I ever started back in college was One Piece. They made a live action version on Netflix and it made it so popular. I think that's part of the reason why some of my Devil Fruit videos get so popular is because so many people
Yeah.
got into it. Basically, it's an anime about a boy who wants to be a pirate. And it's a world where 90% of it is made of water. But if you eat one of these devil fruits, you get superpowers, but you
Okay.
drown as soon as you touch water. And so being a pirate with a devil fruit, it's the lesser of two evils or so. And what I did is I looked for the gum fruit, which is like the main one, and I printed it on my Anycubic Cobra, which was like at that time to me the high end printer it was like a $200 printer.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that video got like 1 million views, and I was like, and people were like, "Hey, can I buy them?" And
Yeah.
I was like, and that's where you get into that whole, is it okay to sell somebody else's art?
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah, for me, that is a hard no because my dad used to be an artist and people would steal his work all the time. I was like, I'm not going to sell physical products of this 3D model this guy made unless I get permission. And so I reached out to, his name's Red Bushido over on Colts 3D, and he's a guy from Spain. 3D modeling is not even his full-time job,
Really? Wow.
and he's incredibly talented. And so I hit him up and I was like, "Hey man, people really want me to sell physical versions of this. Could I sell the physical ones?" And at first he was like, "No." He said, "Honestly, like this is just, but if you want, I can't stop you." And I was like,
Yeah.
"Unless I have your express permission, I'm not going to."
Right.
After talking to him for a little while, eventually he kind of came around and we've been working together ever since. Anytime I see a new devil fruit come up, I send it to him and then he spits it out within a day or so. But he's also really into One Piece. That's actually where every single devil fruit that I've made, he's 3D modeled it based off of the official art. And so, yeah, it's just back to the original question. It's a really popular anime that has millions of fans. When people talk about like the big three, they're usually talking about like Naruto, One Piece, and Dragon Ball. So it's in the running for top anime.
I do always hear you mention Red Bushido in your videos, and it's cool kind of hearing the evolution of that relationship that you have. Because, when I think about people who sell 3D prints, I think for a lot of people, the natural way to get into it, it seems like is the path of least resistance, which was like going the route of selling your traditional dragons or Flexi Factory or
Mhm.
going like the Cinderwing subscriptions, things like that. And I always say, I think if you can carve out a more specific niche where you're selling something that like every other 3D printer isn't selling, I feel like it's a little more work to get started, but like maybe easier path once you're going down that path. You mentioned that your father had been an artist. So you had that moral basis to say, okay, like I'm not going to sell somebody else's art. Like I want to get his blessings. In terms of going down that process, was it just a matter of reaching out via email and trying to foster that relationship? Or like for people who are looking to, maybe they find a file on cults, they're just like, this is my genre. How would you recommend people try to foster relationships like that with?
Yeah. So first, I never intended to sell anything. It was
Yeah.
like it just so many people asked, and then but it's really what's built up my whole. I would never have owned a Bamboo Labs without
Yeah.
that. I would rather get out of selling stuff and just
Okay.
I like building. I like making my little Mando helmets and my CS:GO stuff. But yeah, so if somebody though wants to reach out to people on Cults 3D, there is no like direct messaging system. You can only leave comments on their profile, and those are very public. So I've noticed people were leaving them for red over there, but usually if somebody has, especially an artist, if they have a presence on My Mini Factory or Cults or something like that, usually they've got an Instagram. And Instagram, you can just DM people, and then it'll usually send them a notification that somebody's trying to reach out. If they don't answer you, then they don't answer you. I also reached out to, there's these guys, they're called Printed Obsession, and they're probably the most popular like resin miniatures that are out there. They have, I want to say, like 20,000 people subscribed to them on Patreon. And I just reached out and I said, hey, I'm printing your minis. Is it cool if I tag you guys in it? And they're like, yeah, of course. Also, here is all of our minis, like for free. They gave me a
Oh,
whole bunch of
nice.
their premium files. They were like, yeah, don't sell them. But they're like,
Right.
we'd appreciate if you make videos. So really tag the people in it. Everyone's super excited about the exposure. Just to see that somebody is printing their art and how it turns out, they can get the conversation started. And then you can be like, hey, do you mind if I sell this on my Etsy?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a good way to approach it because I have found over the years, I know for me, like when I had first gotten into 3D printing, I was like the opposite of you. I got into 3D printing thinking that I was going to sell stuff. And then I ended up being
Mhm.
like, I don't want to sell this, but I love it so much that this is just like my new hobby. But I remember at the beginning, I was really nervous about this idea of reaching out to designers and approaching them and trying to figure out the best way to foster that relationship. And exactly like you were saying, I found over time that I would actually have a lot of different people who make models reach out and ask, would I do videos with their stuff in it? And I think just my experience of all the people that I've met over the years who design files, I think just like really nice people. And I think a lot of them, like you said, if you're willing to make like videos or content or stuff like that, can be a really mutually beneficial relationship. So obviously, of course, always get permission and make sure that you're going about things the right way if you want to approach selling that. I definitely think that starting there to foster that relationship can definitely be a good go.
And the other thing is people don't like being like, I guess, paid an exposure, if you will. That's a huge thing that like
Right.
really annoys me is whenever
Yeah.
someone's, hey, if you 3D print me every devil fruit you make, I'll just put it on my Instagram. And I was like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I can do
Yeah.
that. Put it on my Instagram.
Yeah.
And they're like, but my thing is, if they're selling a premium file, just buy it. Don't
Yeah.
ask people for free stuff. Like, just fucking buy the file and then make it and then show them that you know how to make it. And then they would typically reach out and be like, oh, this person is a professional and we want to see what they can do. Stop asking for free stuff, man. It's so annoying.
Over the years of having like different small businesses, I think like the world of influencers has created an interesting dynamic where, yeah, I guess it does. As somebody who makes content and is on that side of it, it does always surprise me like how many people will approach and exactly like you said, ask for free stuff for exposure. And I think a lot of times, even for people who 3D model, it might not seem like there's hard costs, but if you spend a lot of time 3D modeling, it takes so much talent and so much dedication to get to the point where you can make that advanced of a model where even if your software isn't like a super hard cost, just the hours that go into it,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a crazy amount of
I've spent
talent that it takes.
hundreds on software and tutorials like Blender Bros. I spent a solid month just doing one of their hard surface modeling courses. I can make inorganic objects. So like I could take that drill that you see right there, I could model that pretty easily. But if you want to model somebody's face, that takes actual artistic talent that I don't have. Yeah, I've done 3D modeling. I'm doing it now. I can only do hard surface objects and I use my iPad. I think his name is Wong Art. We
Um,
follow each other,
yeah.
and I've been talking
Yeah.
to him about Nomad Sculpt. He got me into that. That guy's also super talented.
I think he makes quite a few tutorials as well. Yeah, no, the world of 3D modeling, that's mad talent that it takes to
I wish
really
I had the
get that
attention
stuff.
span to just sit
Yeah.
down and learn that stuff, but I'm just an ADHD guy who he doesn't have that skill.
Yeah, hey, maybe one day you can have a good session sitting down doing 3D modeling and watching the rest of your anime for hours and
Maybe,
hours.
yeah. I don't know. I
Yeah.
only watch it now when I work out, so I turn it
Oh,
on while I'm
okay.
walking on the treadmill.
That's a good way to do it. Even for me, like working out is a difficult thing to stick to. So props to you for that one. But coming back to the devil fruit. So I will say for me, like when I see yours, I don't know what it's called, but there's a spiky, it like looks spiky and electric. And every time I see that one, it
Yeah.
satisfies my brain. Yeah, I think you have them nearby.
Are you talking about this one?
No, okay. I'm
Oh,
so
this
sorry.
is a spiky one with lightning bolts. This one.
Yes, that's the one. Every time I see this thing, there's two things that come to my mind. And it's funny that you say it's difficult because, for one, out of all of them, it's the one that would be the most enticing to me if I saw it in nature to eat. But conversely,
So
it looks like it would be incredibly difficult to print. So, what was the process for this?
Oh, yeah. So this was a monster. So Red came out with this, and like whenever he makes a model, I try to cut the bottom so that it can sit flat on my shelf.
Yeah.
But I saw this abomination. And I was like, Red, what are you doing, man? How do I cut this flat? There's no everything on this. I'm hurting myself just holding this thing. But
Sorry to pick the worst
no,
one
you
to make you hold on camera.
let's see. I don't know if you probably can't see it in my oh, there it is. You see that seam right there?
Oh, okay.
Right here. So what I did, and there's no way you could see it. So I tried to do a flat cut so that I could have two flat sides to print on and then just stick them together. That's the secret for some of my other more circular models. I'll just cut it in half and glue it together. But this one, anywhere you put a straight plane through, you'd cut a lightning bolt like this and you'd cut it and have a floating piece.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what do I do? And I had to like draw out my plane and I cut a little V. I was just going, it was horrible. And I printed it once and I will never make a HD remake of this one because it's done. But yeah, that one, it was a lot of blender work. So yeah, that took me quite a few hours to try to get done.
The good news is your hard work did not go to waste because every video of yours that I see it on the shelf, my eye is instantly drawn to that one. But
it's a good one. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a favorite? And then maybe you have like more context than I do of like maybe what these fruits represent. But do you have one if you saw one out in nature that you would be drawn to consuming?
So the problem is I already know what their powers are. So like to me, the prettiest one is I have one that looks like a flower. It's pink with a little yellow thing in the middle. And I like that one the most because I know what it takes to create it from a 3D printing perspective. I know that I have to print this thing in this white specific polysonic clay. And then I have to hand airbrush every little pink dot on there. And I try to make it fade into the white. So that's my favorite as far as looks go. The ones I'd be like this guy.
Okay. It just like it looks juicy and delicious.
Yes. Yeah. This one, it looks tasty. It hits all of those Tide Pod vibes where you just want to eat it. But that one also gives you the power to, it's called like the op fruit. And the guy is a skilled surgeon. And basically like he creates like a zone around him. And anybody that enters it, he could remove their head and stick it on their back.
Oh, shit.
And they're still alive. And yeah, like there's multiple times that he'll just cut people into multiple body parts and then they're still alive. They just can't do anything. And so I was like, yeah, that's the one I want. And he can like teleport. It's crazy. So yeah, that would be the one I would eat for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like to fully have the full perspective of what these would really mean for me, I feel like I'd have to still watch the series, but it's interesting to hear. You talk about your process for one of the devil fruits, like airbrushing it and really like spending the time to make it look exactly how you wanted. There was a video you had made a while back, and I forget what the exact file that you were working on at the time was, but I believe, and hopefully you'll know what I'm talking about. You had said that it was a miniature that you were working on, I believe. You said that it was taking you maybe like a month of post-processing, just like from a painting standpoint. Do you maybe know what model I'm talking about?
I have a feeling because there's only a couple that I have painted and wanted to post-process, and I'm still not done with it, which is crazy. I've got some of the pieces of it because it's still not done. And I also started a new job since that video came out. I'm the director of AI integration for the Army.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've been busy with that and I haven't had time to paint. And I've also got severe carpal tunnel, so it's hard to do little paintings. Yeah, this character is called Kaido, is resin printed.
Yeah, this is definitely what I was referring to.
Yeah, but the post-processing is what you're asking about.
I personally, I love to paint my models, but like me painting my models I'll tell you, it's not a month-long process. It is a month-long process, actually, because I procrastinate for so long, but not because I don't do very intricate painting, but I've seen from different props that you've done and just like different things that you've done in general, like you're very good your artistry is very good on these. And I guess
I
kind of my
appreciate
question
that.
was when I heard you talking about you had this plan and you thought it was going to take you a long time to do it. When you're working on something that intricate and that detailed, where do you even start in terms of laying down colors? Where do you even start with something like that?
Yes, typically the problem is with painting. So I used to paint a lot of D&D miniatures
Oh,
back
yeah.
when I played more D&D and had more time. But with those, it was tough because I just had to figure out a color palette. The guy that does all my tattoos, me and him are really good friends. He owns a shop over in Raleigh, and he showed me basically the new color wheel. And so he was able to help me figure out what colors go together. But for models like this, already I know all the colors of this character,
Right.
and also comes with a dragon. So this was actually the part that
Ooh.
was going to take a long time. Yeah, so I already know what colors I need, and there's a video where I showed all of the paints I already have, and I just try to find my base colors first. So for him, it's like a type of teal. I know I'm going to need a brown, and I know I need like skin tones. And so I do my real big colors first, but I also try to pick the shadowier, darker types because for me, it's easier to go in with highlights than it is to come in and do undertones.
Okay.
A lot of people like to do like dark washes, which fill in shadows, but for some reason, whenever I do dark washes, it just looks dirty. It looks like I
Yeah.
just smeared dirt on their face. So I usually like to go in with a darker one and then I take a highlight brush and then I highlight. But like the paint brushes that I use for these are like it's 3 little tiny hairs
Yeah.
on the end of a stick. So yeah, that's why it takes me so long is because I'm just sitting there like going like this and trying to get his little eyeballs and stuff. Yeah, the real problem with the post processing, the reason why it takes so long is because when you resin print, so the normal support material starts fat and then it gets thinner into a cone if you're using tree
Yeah.
supports, and the inside's hollow. With resin prints, they're like long sticks that then go at a sharp angle and then touch a little tiny point.
Okay.
And that's just to prevent things from floating in the air. So typically, whenever you have them, you get like little pock marks or you get little pimples that stick out from where you broke the support off and it cured and you didn't quite have it fully there. So you just got to take these little tiny sanding sticks and you just got to file off every tiny little niblet.
Yeah.
And it's pretty difficult on his little mustache
Yeah.
because it's just floating out there and you don't want to break it because resin is also very fragile until it's fully cured. But yeah, my process is just get up a reference image and just pick 4 main colors and start laying down paint and then go in with highlights. But
Yeah.
there's plenty of people that people can follow for that. I think Ninjon and Miniac, I watch those guys and they do some crazy paintings.
Yeah, this whole video is just me complaining about things that I would love to sit down and spend time to do. But that was something maybe about a year ago. I started watching a lot of videos about miniatures, and man, the guys and girls who are like really good at that are like really talented people. And I think like my brain when I first got into 3D printing, and again, like I was starting off with really basic stuff. I thought because it was already a 3D model, I was like, well, it's gonna be easier. You already have your basis for where
It's
things
like
go, where things are.
coloring.
Yeah. And then I did my first couple models. And I was like, oh, they're flat looking. And then that's when I really started like diving into that content. I was like, man, this is like a whole other thing you can really dedicate yourself to. And it's really impressive to me, like people who are totally
Yeah, the
crazy
guys
at
that
that.
do like the Warhammer mini. So that was what kind of led into me getting into the whole Warhammer community. I don't play Warhammer because you got to have like $3,000 to build an army or whatever.
Yeah.
But like watching those guys paint those minis and they like draw the little dirt coming off of its like shoulder pauldron. And I was like, dude, and they're like, yeah, this guy got into battle. So I'm going to flick some red so he has blood on his face. And I was like, the techniques that they're doing are just crazy. So I usually go to like I got a shop up in the main town and I'll go in there and I just look at their paints and they've got some crazy stuff called contrasts, which
Yeah.
is the paints that just glaze over and just tint it, but
Yeah.
don't take away your details somehow. I don't know how it works. It's magic.
Growing up, and I'm sure for you, it sounds like with your dad being an artist, I'm sure you probably always had like, supplies and stuff like that in the house. My mom was, I won't say she was an artist, but she's very crafty. And we always had like, acrylic paints. That like the paints that I was familiar with. That's where I started with my 3D prints. Then the world opened up to me of contrast paints and washes and things like that that I had never experimented with before. I've seen in your videos, you have pots like the Citadel paints and
Mhm.
some other brands I'm not familiar with. Like, for people looking, maybe getting into that side of things, do you have any recommendations of where to start or maybe products that you really enjoy?
Yeah, anybody that wants to get into mini paintings, the easiest stuff to come by, especially if you have a hobby shop, would be Citadel. I really like their stuff. It is a little pricier. The one I really want to try out is Monument Hobbies. I think they're a bit of a newer brand, but they sell you like basically they don't sell you the bullshit. Like you don't need 50 different shades of brown. You can
Right.
just get 3 shades of brown and then mix it with black or white to get whatever tone you need. And that's the vibe that I get from Monument. They also have sets for like, you want to paint humanoids. Here's all the creatures colors. That's the one I go with. You can also buy, I think Vallejo is on Amazon. I bought their like 120 pack, which is what is most of the stuff that you see on my shelf. But yeah, really, even just going to Hobby Lobby and getting yourself like folk art or whatever, that stuff is, yeah, just fine. I use it. Now, I do a lot of airbrushing as well. So my dad was an airbrush artist.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so I'm not very good with an airbrush, but I know how to make it shoot and work. And so, yeah, Citadel sells airbrush paint. So I use that. And then I think the other one's like Creatix or something like that. It's just stuff I get at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah, no, that's I guess here we go again. But yeah, airbrushing was something I also recently dipped my toes into, and that was a whole other thing. I started out and I had done some research online, and I like watering down with various different like either thinners or water, alcohol, like my acrylic paints, and then I had bought purpose built like airbrush paints for the first time, and these are nice. Like these are
Yeah. You're like,
really
whoa, this is
something.
like skim milk.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so thin.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's it. It's crazy how many different like individual skills within like a category of painting.
What kind of airbrush did you get?
Just first started off, it was literally just like a handheld battery operated one, which
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, it
Like no
wasn't
air
good.
compressor?
It was literally like a handheld air compressor. It was like all
Interesting.
built in one. I had a very small office at the time, so I literally had no space for anything. So at the time, it was like honestly the perfect little thing to get introduced to it. Since then, I've upgraded just whatever. There's so many brands that like sell like drop ship the same thing, but like the general one that you'll see on Amazon, maybe you'll know what I'm
Oh,
talking
gotcha.
about.
Okay.
So I upgraded that, and I don't even remember like a different airbrush on that setup. But for me, again, like I'm not a professional artist. It gets the job done for what I do it for. But yeah, I guess do you have any airbrush recommendations?
My dad's always been a big fan of Iwata. That's the standard. I picked my Iwata up at Hobby Lobby. They just had it in a little glass case. I think it was $100. But you do got to have a compressor. And then you got to have the correct tube because the one that comes with the airbrush needs to fit into another tube. Like it doesn't go straight into the compressor.
Okay, gotcha.
And so, yeah, Iwata is my favorite. And you can just get the gravity fed. People get those like siphon ones that go on the bottom. Don't do that unless you're like a pro.
I mean, for even hearing you say that Iwata is like a recommendation for $100 for that airbrush, I've seen them go up to like multiple $100. So it seems to get something that's gonna serve you well, it's a decent price point.
I think my dad has like a $1,300 that he uses. Like he's still, because he's retired from the military, and so he's just airbrushing for fun. He'll airbrush supposedly he's doing a picture of my daughter.
Oh,
but yeah, that'll be really nice. So
that's cool. That's super cool. But yeah, no, it's like I said, it's a whole other, again, obviously for your dad, it's been like a whole, but yeah, it is crazy how you can get so delved into the different areas of.
But there's so many hobbies here that we have, but it's like they're all something. It's so funny because my wife always complains. She's like, Blake, you got another hobby. And I'm like, no, I was like, it's all adjacent in some way to 3D printing. I was like, I'm really into playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's adjacent to 3D printing because I 3D print D&D models. And I'm also into painting and stuff. And I paint my 3D prints. And so, yeah, it all comes back to 3D printing being the core.
I always say like 3D printing is a hobby that can intersect with almost everything for all the files that are out there and everything that exists. But my 3D printer has, for better or for worse, gotten me into a lot of additional hobbies and definitely have spent a lot of additional money on different things since then.
3D print your own RC cars now.
Into it. The sky's the limit. But thinking of other things you can get into, something that I saw that you have, that if there's any machine that I've ever seen that I've been jealous of, you have this industrial shredder for processing plastic pieces. I've like weird flex, but there's literally never been anything that I've seen somebody have that I've been so jealous of. Can you tell us a little bit more about this machine?
The Polystruder is what it's called. This whole thing, it became the business of Armour3dprints. My whole thing was I wanted to make nerd collectibles that were cheaper for people. I didn't want to make a whole huge profit on things. I just wanted, and so one of the ways that I was going to save was by taking my supports or any failed prints and then turning it back into 3D printer filament. If people send me their shreds or whatever, and then for $10, I can send you a spool. So you send me 2 kilograms of stuff, I'll send you back 1 kilogram for $10. And I was like, how do I do that? And like the setup for it, I think was $20,000, like minimum. And I was like, I could get like a small business loan. I was like, but I don't really want to do that. I'm still like, I'm a millennial.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to go that into debt. And then I saw this company, Polystruder, was coming out with so you say it's industrial. It is not. It is considered a desktop shredder because I started with like this, I think it's called the Sunjoe, the
The same
shredder.
one. Yes.
Yeah, it's in my attic right now.
Same.
And it just shot plastic. It exploded out of the trash bag I put in the bottom. And I was like, this is dangerous. Even with iPro, I didn't feel safe. And so I was like, what's going on? Like, how do I even fix this? I was like, do I have to invent the technology? And then, like I said, I found this company, Polystruder. I want to say they're based out of California. And they were like, we're going to make this shredder, but it's not going to be ready for a whole 2 years. And so I like put in my pre-order. It was like $2,000.
Yeah.
And they sent it to me. I had just gotten it relatively recently. And I will say, great shredder. The thing is perfect. I want to do a full review on it. I don't know how it's worth $2,000
Yeah.
because they're like, we use Shred AI. And I was like, I literally work in AI.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not an engineer. I don't build the stuff, but I don't know what model you could possibly be using to help with shredding. Just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I had to reach out to them because actually I have the piece right here. So this is the shredder piece. The shredder goes between all these this comb, and I don't know if you see how thick that steel is.
Yeah.
But I've got these two bent teeth right here.
Jeez, from a 3D print?
So that's what I thought. So I hit them up and because I had to take this whole thing apart, and part of it is 3D printed. And so I'm like, again, I still have yet to figure out how it's so expensive. Like a lot of their parts are 3D printed. And so I was like, hey, I don't know what's going on with these teeth. I was like, they bent. I can't bend them back. Tried with like pliers and stuff. And then they were like, well, you must have stuck something in there that didn't belong. And then I was like, I've only stuck PLA. Like I haven't even done any of the other stuff. And then they were like, nah, it's got to be something else. And they're like, it only costs $25 for a new comb. And I was like, okay, I guess that's fine. And they're like, we'll actually cover it for you since we saw your video. They saw my video and they were like, we see that you like the product and we'll send this to you for free. After they said that, I had looked over into my little bucket of things. I don't even see it near me right now, but I found a metal file that had fallen into the shredder.
Okay.
I assume it was in my bucket of shreds and I just scooped it and dumped it in there without checking. And so I showed it to him. I was like, hey guys, I was like, I'm so dumb. I was like, I am so sorry. I will pay for please pass me your PayPal. I will send you the money for that new piece. So they sent me the new comb. I got it set up, but now I'm having it says it's having thermal runaway. Yeah. And so I'm like, it has some sensor in it that checks to make sure it's not getting too hot. And it's not working anymore. So I have to email them back to figure out what's wrong because I've checked everything. But it's a really cool shredder for sure. It is unfortunately only the first step. They're coming out with the full line of where it's going to melt all those shreds down and it's going to it has to run over this air thing that'll also cool it and get it and check to make sure that it's the correct 0.75 millimeter. And then it'll spool it.
Oh,
so
okay, cool.
They haven't made all those pieces yet, but it says coming soon. Yeah, so I'm hoping to eventually get that full setup, and then I don't know, maybe one day if I ever have $20,000, I'll buy the real boy one because I think using recycled plastic would be pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I agree. I always save all my 3D scraps and I have the Sunjoe, which I have gone through a stupid amount of appliances trying to find something that would be able to process my 3D prints, get it into a fine finished product. So as soon as I saw your video on that, I was instantly intrigued. And like you said, it's at $2,000. It's a little more than I'd want to pay for something that it's a tough pill to swallow, but it really interests me. I think if they could lower that price point down a little bit, it would be very enticing for me.
I feel like if they could bring it down to $1,000, it would be a much more manageable pill to swallow. But $2,000 is just the only problem is once the next step is $6,000,
right?
And it's because I guess they've got to have a lot of torque and they go real slow. And
Yeah.
so that thing processes, I want to say it's like a kilogram or a kilogram and a half an hour, but it gets through it. That big giant trash bucket that I had is about half the size. And I've had to stop doing it because I just, got to figure out this problem. But yeah, knock down that price, man. I think that they'd be selling them.
Yeah, for sure. They can put my name on if they can lower down the price, they can put my name on the wait list for it because as soon as I saw it, like I said, there's I think there is a big need for the market, and especially it's such a common topic that I talk to people about on here about how this idea that at some point like every home is going to have a 3D printer, and I still think we're a ways away from that, but
Yeah.
as it becomes more commonplace, like if there could be an affordable version of a machine like that that allowed you to exactly like you're hoping for, recycle your scraps and just turn it back into more filament. I think that's again just like another one of those things that gets us like a little closer to it being something that is like a full solution in a home for manufacturing stuff. Which is
Yeah, I probably, and it's like one of the more annoying comments I get. It actually just happened relatively recently, so it's gonna keep happening now that I've said
yeah,
it. But is when people are like, "Oh, you're just like promoting plastic waste,"
yeah,
and "Oh, you're like," someone said, "What is it?" They're like, "Oh, you're just printing a bunch of bullshit,"
yeah,
and I was like, "I could just buy this bullshit." I was like,
yeah,
"I'm making it myself," and I was like, "You clearly don't know anybody that collects things. Like,
yeah,
we just have bullshit."
yeah.
Yeah.
It's always the person who has no videos whatsoever who has the most opinions about how you're living your life
One
out.
guy was like, "Yeah, you're just contributing more plastic to the ocean." And I was like, "I literally keep my stuff in a garbage can in my
Yeah,
room." I was like, "None of this makes it into the trash can."
yeah.
And yeah, but you can't like
Can't
you
win them
can't help.
all. Can't please them
But
all.
if I can make this little recycling business, then I'll be like, "Ha, I
Yeah,
gotcha."
show them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, no more microplastics.
yeah. If I hit $1 for every person who told me that I was single handedly killing all the sea turtles and destroying the earth,
It's just your fault.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
exclusively my fault. And at that point, I would have enough dollars to buy one of those shredders.
Yeah, definitely no corporations.
Nobody
It's
else,
you.
just the 3D printers
It's
out
that
there. I love talking to other 3D printers about this topic and that we're on the
it's
same
so
page here.
silly.
So you obviously like you have your double fruits. You have been getting the manual helmets. I know you do a lot of other 3D printed props, things like that. Do you have any projects you have started or are in the back of your mind that you've really been hoping to get into? Anything crazy on the radar for you project wise?
So, I actually have been making a video on it right now. I am in the process of making a Majora's Mask
Oh, nice.
from The
Cool.
Legend of Zelda. So, I'm
Yeah.
in the process of painting it. I'm only doing half of it so that I can show in the video and stuff.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that's a current project I'm on. This has been like in my mind. I've brought it up with some of my coworkers. They are all software engineers that build AI. And I know Nico from Nico Industries was building something similar,
Yeah.
where he's trying to feed 2D images into an AI model that can then spit out a 3D model.
Yeah.
What I'm hoping is to create a large language model, so something like ChatGPT, where you could tell it what you're looking for. So you'd say, I want to make a model of Sonic. And then it could query the internet and see what Sonic looks like and then spit you out a 3D model. And you could say, I want it to do a heroic pose. And then it could
Mm.
give you like, okay, here's a same thing, but in this pose. And yeah, I thought that would be a really cool thing. The problem is it takes a lot of GPUs and processing power to run AI models. Fiscally, it's not exactly feasible. I'd have to have a subscription service, but
Yeah.
it's something that I'm trying to work on. Unfortunately, I work for the government. The engineers I work with are government civilians, and I'm a contractor. So yeah, so I can't
Gotcha.
exactly leverage them like that. But I
Yeah.
think it'd be cool.
Yeah. No, that's when Nico was just coming out with what he was working on. He had been on the podcast around that time and I was talking to him about it and I was super excited. And that what you're describing, like a model where you could instead of take an image prompt, take a text prompt. And I love to play around with AI, but I'm certainly not on your level of it of where the technology's at. But I always wonder like how far away we are from getting somewhere you can get from like text to 3D model and the time frame that we're getting from like text to images right now. Cause I've probably been maybe about for I'll call it a year and a half that like I've been interested in playing around with the different models. And even just in the time that I've gotten into it, it's amazing to see how far along the images have come of just a year ago, what it was popping out and how goofy some of the stuff it would generate was compared to nowadays. For you being in that field, I imagine you probably see some crazy stuff around the developments.
So being in the field, like I said, I'm not an engineer, but I've seen where we're not at. Things like OpenAI's ChatGPT and stuff is like real pretty to look at, but it's not, it doesn't have very many applications. So the making 3D models out of an AI model would not be difficult. There's already multiple technologies do exist, but it's just not something people care about. Companies like Red Hat or Google or Amazon, these are companies that we work with, but they don't care about. They're like, why would we need a 3D model? They're like, we could just pay a guy.
Yeah.
Like, and they're like, why do we need something that could spit out 3D models? No, they're making software for targeting SA2 sites, which are missile sites. They're making software for detecting radio frequencies. They're trying to harvest big data. They're like, hey, we have these hundreds of thousands of IP addresses that are just more than that. We have millions of IP addresses that are flooding our network. We want to figure out which ones are nefarious. A person can't do it, but an AI model could. That's the kind of stuff that they care about, that they're throwing millions of dollars at. They don't really care about 3D.
About developing the best way to develop an articulated dragon.
They're like, hey, how do we do this cool dino? Yeah.
It makes sense for sure.
Yeah. They're like, we could have the most downloads on Thangs.
Yeah, for sure. And if you don't mind me asking, again, it's not that new, but it is a newer field where certainly when I was in school 10 years ago, like nobody was saying like, hey, get into AI as a career. Like, how did you kind of transition into that?
Yeah. So me and my wife joke about this all the time. I just keep looking into success things. All of it was super, super lucky. I failed out of college back when between 2010 to 2013. I failed out of multiple colleges, trying to be an engineer and then a nurse and stuff. And then I ended up just joining the Air Force. I studied for my ASVAB. If anybody is thinking about joining the military, study. Nobody knows that you're allowed to do that. And I did really well. And so I got picked to be a geospatial intelligence analyst. It's just a guy like Predators and Reaper drones. I was the guy that watched the video. And I'd be like, I see one adult male with a weapon. He's pointing it at some kids. He's probably a bad guy. It's a lot more technical than that, but that's basically what I would do. And then they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely a bad guy. Make him gone. And then, so I did that for 4.5 years. And then I broke my back trying to be a cool guy doing special forces stuff. And then they medically discharged me. And then when that happened, I picked up a job. Have you ever heard of JSOC before?
No, I don't think I'm.
It's a Joint Special Operations Command. So if you've ever seen a Call of Duty game, you're usually playing as a member of SEAL Team 6, who is a member of, It's like an organization that helps run those other organizations. And I just happened to get picked up to be a contractor with them, basically doing the same thing, just looking at Predator and Reaper drones. And then AI started slowly making its way into our stuff it's called computer vision. And so what it would do is it would look at our FMV feed, and then it would see an adult male walking across, and then it would draw a square around him and go, adult male. And then I was like, all right, cool, thanks, computer. I already knew that, but it's my job. But they were trying to automate that process, and I was like super resistant to it. And then last November, before that, I got there in October, I think. I got deployed to Syria with some very special forces people. We were at a FOB, or a forward operating base. So we're just in the middle of a very hot area. Like one time we went up to like smoke cigars, and all of a sudden I started hearing like snaps, and I was like, what's happening? And they're like, we're being shot at. We need to go downstairs. And so while we were there, I think one day we got blown up 25 times. There was a time where if you look back in the news, Iraq and Syria were taking a bunch of one-way drones, just quadcopters with bombs on them. I was really scared. I texted my wife and I was like, hey, I can't tell you what's going on, but I love you. And if this is the last you hear from me, I love you and my daughter so much. At one point, I tore my shoulder carrying a Stinger missile up to the roof because we were like in some shit and I was very scared.
I feel like in some shit is almost putting it lightly in this situation, but
it was not great. It was like, I think I was awake for 28 hours or something like that, just trying to make sure, because there were rangers there, like Army Rangers, and then like these other special forces group. And I was attached to the special forces group, and we were like, I was like, what are we going to do if we start getting stuff like blown up? They're like, we're getting into this unmarked car. We're just going to drive. We're going to get back to the border. And I was like, all right. And while that, I like, as soon as that, the next day, I was like, fuck this job. I was like, I hate this job. I will not do this anymore. I was like, I'm 32, 31, 32. I can't remember. I think I'm 32. I was like, I am 32. I will not do this anymore. I was like, I'm too old. My knees hurt. Everything hurts. And so I just shot out my resume all over LinkedIn. There's a thing called clearance jobs, and it's for people who have security clearances where they can look at jobs.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got hit up by this guy. He's like, hey, do you want to do AI? And I was like, sure, whatever. I'll do whatever.
Yeah,
And then
at this point,
I'll do whatever you want. And then he's like, okay, cool. Do you think you could teach yourself Python? And I was like, I know C++ from when I was in school. I think I could teach myself Python. And he's like, cool, take this course. You have a month, pass it, and we can talk. And so I did it in 3 days. I did the course as fast as I could. And I called him back. I was like, hey, I passed. And then he got me an interview. And during that interview, we started getting blown up again while I was on this video interview. And they're asking me questions. I go, hey, guys, I'm very busy. And I put on like a flak vest and I put a helmet on. And I was like, I have to go. I was like, can we please finish this interview later? And they're like, oh my God, okay. So they called me the next day and they offered me the job. I was like, please,
wow.
yeah. I was like, I'll do anything. And then it
Now,
was like
just
a
interrupt
week
you.
later. Yeah.
Just interrupt you real quick on that. Now, like the people interviewing you, was this like, I guess, were they like civilian people or were this like a military position?
These are still Army. So we call them green suiters. So that's like regular military. Then there's civilians, which they work for the military, but they are civilians still. So they can have beards. Like they don't follow military rules, but they're still paid by the government and they get retirement. That's basically like the big thing. And then there's contractors, which is what I am. And so I was talking to military civilian. They're usually the equivalent of officers. And so I was talking to military civilians who had no military experience.
Okay. Because
so
I was going to say, I've been interviewing people a lot recently and I'm just like playing out the scenario in my head of like crazy things that have happened in my interview and just like imagining that situation. I was sitting with you on that interview of that had to be crazy.
They also saw me and I'm in like a white brick room with like fluorescent lights and on this like junky bed. I have like carpet up on the wall and there's dust everywhere. And I'm like, I'm deployed. So, and they said, they're like, yeah, you have the job. I put in my 2 weeks while I was in country still with my other job. And I remember I got back, I had to take a helicopter from Syria to Iraq. And while I was in Iraq, we took a one-way drone. So just a quick heads up on IEDs, the way one-way drones work is when they fly in, the nose hits the ground and it crumples it, and that's how they blow up. There has to be enough nose pressure for it to blow up. This one, the wing clipped a flagpole. And so there wasn't enough nose cone pressure, so it didn't blow up. And it was 20 feet away from my bed.
Oh my God.
And it didn't blow up. And I was leaving the country in 24 hours. And I was like, oh, buddy. I was like, I almost died on the last 24 hours of my deployment. And I got back and then I fell into this AI job. And so really it's what I am is the liaison between military and engineers. So like I explain the military stuff for engineers and I explain the engineer stuff for the military. So it's pretty nice. It's remote.
That's great.
So,
yeah. That's one of the, compared to your previous role, one of the many great things about
one of the huge highlights.
Yeah.
Don't catch as many stray bullets over in Carolina.
So maybe your wife's mad at you, but
a lot of farmers out here. So
yeah, you never know. Now to back up on that story just a little bit, if you don't mind. So you talk about you're going through this process, you're in college, and it sounds like it's not going well. And you're like in the engineering side. Then I think you said you tried nursing maybe for a little bit, and then you were like, this is not me. I had a very similar path. I started in pre-med and then I was like, okay, no, nursing. And then I finally finished, you know what, let's just do psychology and just close this out. But I don't want to say don't go to college because there are people who that is the right path. I think it is something like I don't think college is developed with society as much as maybe as it could have, in the sense that there is so much information out there on the internet. And not that I want my doctor to be learning from YouTube, but I think a lot of roles out there that you maybe don't need to go to college for. And I don't know if that's always presented to people. I guess for you and like your experience, do you have any thoughts on that? And then like a step further that is not part of my story, but like for you, like having military experience, like going that path, is that, I know you've had a treacherous journey with that, but is that an option that like you think you would recommend for people who are younger out there?
So I do have a degree. I got it 2 years ago. If somebody is looking to work for the government in some way, just get a degree. It doesn't matter what it's in. My degree is in counterintelligence. I got it online from American Public University System. I don't know if you remember when you were going to college, was there a difference between nationally accredited and regionally accredited?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so it used to be if you like University of Phoenix online is nationally accredited and the University of Southern Florida is regionally accredited. So it's better to be regionally accredited. During Donald Trump's administration, he got rid of that. So now everybody is regionally accredited. So now the government does not care where you get your degree from, which is why it's just a piece of paper. What they usually care about is what can you bring to the table? What kind of experiences do you have? The reason why they liked me is because I am one of the more outgoing intelligence analysts. Normally, when you talk to those guys, they don't look at you. So I had that going for me. The other thing is, I have a clearance. That is a huge factor for anybody who's trying to get into the workforce. Because I know a lot of people like that I went to high school with, they don't own a home. I've had friends who are just like, I can't own it. I literally cannot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's tough. And so for me, the military was a last, like, I didn't grow up in a great home. And so I was like, this is my last chance deal. I have to join. And so I happened to join into a thing where getting a top secret clearance costs about $400,000 if you wanted to just get one right out. The military just pays for that. And so I've got this thing that's worth $400,000 that companies know they don't want to pay for that. And since I already come with it, I am now already viewed as being worth at least $500,000 on top of whatever they want to pay me. If you're gonna join, try to get Intel, because Intel you usually won't deploy. If joining is your last effort, like you need to get something, because it's free healthcare. There's a lot of real good benefits, but it sucks. It really sucks. I was in the Air Force. I still work for the Army, but I don't like how enlisted people get treated. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a ton of respect for anybody who goes down that path. I think for a lot of people out there in this day, buying a house for a lot of people our age is out of the question. And I think just with everything that's happening with inflation and just everything across the board, it's a tough time out there for young people. And I always say I'm thankful to be the age that I am when I was. And I can't imagine being an 18-year-old that's fresh out into the world right now and having to navigate
student loan debt,
the costs and everything. Yeah.
I got lucky that I managed to purchase a house in 2019, right before COVID. Once the pandemic hit, housing prices have gotten insane. I would not have been able to afford the house that I own. So it's crazy. A lot of my friends will buy homes and then rent them out to people. And they're like, no, like we're doing good. And I'm like, no, you are a part of the problem. You are part of the reason why people can't own homes.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at we're trying to move toward Raleigh so that I can put my daughter in a better school system.
Yeah.
And dude, you got to have like houses out there like $700,000-$800,000. And I'm just like, I don't make that much.
No, it really is crazy out there with the timing of right before COVID. We just recently bought our first home. I'm going to be moving in a month. So it is. It's very exciting. But when we were looking over the last couple of months, it's like actually painful a little bit looking at what the prices were in 2019 versus now, because it was like a different world out there. But yeah, I hope that's something that at some point, I don't even know how, but I hope at some point we can see some kind of correction in the market.
I think with the house we were looking at getting over in Raleigh, it was going to be a 7% like interest rate, which is insane. Because I got our house at 2%, which again was another benefit of the military.
Right. Everyone I know who got into a house back then, it was hard to justify moving out just straight from the interest rates.
But that is another good thing about the military. It's called a VA home loan. You don't have to put any money down. You just got to do the cash to close. They get rid of all the closing costs. I don't know. Like I said, I don't really like the military, but there's a lot of perks. You just got to be willing to maybe die.
Heavy costs to pay for sure.
You're like, oh, you want to pay for my college, but I might die?
In this economy?
Maybe.
Yeah. With that note, I feel like we have dived through so many different topics today. I feel like we could dive through a million more, but I won't keep you over time today. I do really appreciate you sitting down with us and just talking through so many of the different talents that you have and hobbies and machines and just a little bit more about your story. It's very interesting. For people who want to follow along on your journey of all the different things that you are working on, all the different things that you have going on, where can people find you on the internet?
Yes, TikTok and YouTube. I am Armour3dprints. It's ARMOUR3D and then prints. And then I think Instagram's Armour3dprints. But yeah, follow me there and we can just get stuff done. I appreciate you having me on and letting me tell my story. This has been fun because, yeah, I only really talk about 3D printing, but telling my whole background's a little bit more fun.
Hey, that's the whole reason I love this podcast is with short form nowadays, I feel like you never get those full stories out of kind of people's life. And we could have sat here and talked to you for another couple hours, but I won't keep you for the full night. But thank you again so much for talking us through everything. All the links will be down below of all the places to access you. And with that said, this has been Meet the Makers.